Good evening and welcome to the May 2nd meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We'll be calling this meeting to order, and I'll also ask everyone to please silence their cell phones. And I'll introduce the board at this time. To my far right, your far left, is Jerry Patamas, who is now a full voting member of the board. Congratulations, Jerry.
Thank you.
To my immediate right is Ken Foreman, who is the vice chairman of the board. My name is TJ Hurry. I'm the chairman. To my left is Ed Van Kuren, also a full voting member of the board, and Bob Dugan, who is a full voting member as well. Also with us tonight is Noreen Stockman, who is our zoning administrator, and Joe Robbins, who is our recording secretary. The Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with applying the zoning bylaws for the town and considers requests for special permits, variances, and appeals as provided in the bylaws, which have been approved by town meeting and the Attorney General's office for the Commonwealth. All decisions are made through the public hearing process. The board's goal is to hear testimony from the applicants and from the public, and also to allow a full and fair discussion of the project prior to rendering a decision. To begin each hearing, the clerk will read the public announcement of the hearing and present any pertinent information from the file, such as referrals from town departments and summarizing correspondences to and from the board. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and time may be extended by vote of the board. The board will then ask questions to the applicant, and then the public will be invited to comment as well. Public comments should be directed only at the project, and I also ask that you please refrain from any personal or derogatory statements. But such comments can also include an opinion in favor or in opposition, or it just might simply be a question about the nature of the project. The chair will limit discussion in the interest of time in the event that comments become repetitive. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized by the chair and should come to the podium to my right here. And I also ask that you please state your name and address for the record. And we typically limit comment to 2 minutes per person. We will then either close or continue the hearing. When the board is satisfied that enough information has been presented by testimony and in the file to make a decision by motion and vote of the board, the hearing will then be closed. Alternatively, we may continue the hearing to a future date and time certain. After the hearing is closed, no more testimony may be taken. With regard to any board discussion and decision, the board may then further discuss the project among ourselves and make a motion to deny or approve will be made and voted upon. The motion will include a summary of key findings and conditions. An affirmative vote of 4 members, which is a supermajority, is required for approvals on motions on special permits, variances, and appeals. A split vote, such as a 3-2 vote, is a failure to carry and would result in denial of the project. Under Massachusetts General Law, if a special permit is denied, the applicant cannot return to the board for 2 years unless the project is substantially different. And turning to the agenda for tonight, we have 3 new hearings, 1 continuation, and a number of items on our open meeting list.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we take the request for board administrative approval for 067-18 out of order, if we could, since the applicant's here and there's a long set of hearings before.
I'll second it.
Motion was made by Ken and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good evening. My name is George Heufelder. My wife Kathy is here also, the owners of 78 Oakwood Avenue. You may remember we were before you and were granted approval to put a detached apartment on our property and have been back and forth with the planning board, who has also granted that approval. We're here tonight to see if we can make some minor modifications. We've deleted a few windows. We also have reduced the size of the house from 34 length to 32 length, and are requesting that we would be allowed to put 30 square foot or 5x6 mudroom as an entrance to the house. And windows removed for financial reasons, bulkhead extended because of headroom going down into it, and we don't encroach on the neighbors beyond the 10-foot allowed. And the building height is increased. You had approved a 7-pitch roof, which is apparently, once we have a 7-pitch roof with that particular place on the lot, increase the height from 15.1 to 17.8. And open any questions here. Minor interior wall changes. It's still a 1-bedroom, 1-story structure where my wife and I will, as it said, age in place, I like to say, continue our journey. Wines age in place, mushrooms age in place, people continue their journey.
Well, thank you. Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
No questions.
No question.
None? Okay.
Make a motion, we accept it, approve it.
Well, we're gonna,
Oh, public comment.
yeah, I think we would want that, right?
What's that?
Public comment, see if anybody.
Well, if it's,
It's administrative.
yeah, it's administrative,
okay.
so we wouldn't be doing that, right?
So now can I move we approve it?
Ken, if,
Accept it?
Ken, if you'd like to, Jerry?
I'd like to.
All right. Is there a second?
Sure. Second.
Okay, motion to approve was made by Jerry and second by Ken. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We also have one administrative other matter for Little Pond Place
Would that be
LLC.
number 2? Okay.
Yes.
Would anyone like to make the motion to take that out of order?
So I'll make a motion to take 120-16 administrative out of order.
Okay, motion to take number 2, open meeting item out of order. That was made by Bob and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And do we have anyone for the applicant, Noreen?
Good evening, Linda Clark, President, Falmouth Housing Corporation. We're looking for this minor change to architectural plans that were already drawn. We originally had in the comp permit 4 accessible apartments, 1 1-bedroom, 2 2-bedrooms, and 1 3-bedroom. The plans were drawn as such that there was 2 1-bedroom, 1 2-bedroom, and 1 3-bedroom. So we've not changed the accessible unit count. We've only are looking for a change on reducing 1 bedroom in 1 unit. In our experience, 1-bedrooms are much more in demand for accessible units. So we're looking for a change.
Okay,
And the second request would be for the signage. The sign plan in the original comp permit requires that the plan be in place prior to the issuance of the building permit. And after speaking with Noreen, it kind of doesn't make any sense. We want the roadways in, the driveways in, the buildings up, and then a plan will be submitted to ZBA before signage obviously is put up prior to occupancy permit. It gives us a little bit more leeway in driving in, what is more visible, and where these signs should go.
okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
No questions.
No question.
None? Okay. How would the board like to proceed?
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion to approve was made by Bob and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Okay, going back to the new hearings, application 15-19, Aylward, 68 Silver Beach Ave in North Falmouth. And for the purposes of tonight, I'll be appointing Bob Dugan as clerk, and hopefully we can make some permanent status on that position soon.
Hi, my name's Paula.
If you would wait just a minute, Bob
Okay.
has to read everything into the record, and then you
All
can
right.
present the project. No worries.
So being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Mass General Laws, you are hereby notified that Paula M. Alward, trustee of Braintree, Mass., applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-3C of the Code of Falmouth to construct a 6-by-9 bathroom addition to the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling on subject property known as 68 Silver Beach Ave, North Falmouth, Mass. For referrals, Concom, no comment. Engineering, general comments regarding dry wells or rain garden for stormwater runoff. Assessors, no comment. Fire department, no comment. Health department, the addition shown on the plan appears not to encroach closer to the existing leach pit. The small increase in structure most likely will not affect the ability to site a future septic system when needed. The future septic system will need variances regardless of the proposed addition is not where that future system will be sited. Water department, no comment. Planning, no comment. And no letters of support or opposition.
Okay.
Or actually, there's one letter of support.
One letter in support, okay.
Okay, we wanted to add a 6-by-9 bathroom addition, which would back up to the existing bathroom we have in the house, which comes out in like a T.
They have the drawing.
They have the drawing, as you can see. We just want to square off the house. My daughter has Crohn's colitis, and she needs to have her own bathroom. That's why I'm asking for this. I know that hardships are not a reason. My parents bought this house in 1961. They gave it to me in 1991, and it's now been left to my 3 children. So, with my husband and I as the trustees, we have no intention of selling it. It's only something we need to enable us to use it as a family, just as we always have.
Okay. Anything else?
No, right now, there's a washer dryer in that area that's gonna be occupied. We marked it out. I don't know if anybody goes up there to look. But the amount of land that we would be using additionally is only like a small strip, 6 feet by about 2 feet. It's already occupied by like a shed type of thing. And again, like my wife said, the purpose is for my daughter has Crohn's colitis, and she needs access to a bathroom, and she needs access to a bathroom. And if there's people there in the house with the one bathroom, it becomes an issue. And so she avoids coming down with her kids. So we like to try to resolve that for her. And I think it's stated that it doesn't infringe upon anything different. And there's some structures there that we were willing to take down. The guy that, the builder that we talked to, we added a deck to a shed, and we take the deck off so there'll be more land, and there's a concrete pad there also, which has the table on it, the patio table for eating out. I can get rid of that also, so it'll be more green. I don't know what else information you need.
All right,
But we're willing to take some of the stuff down to create more open area.
sure.
And like I said, that space is pretty much occupied already.
In 1977, my parents put an addition on, and I think that's when we went over the lot allowance of structures. I don't think it was an issue then, something that zoning looked at, because we were over when we were granted that original building permit to add an addition to the house.
All right.
And that's it.
All right, we'll turn it to board questions if you guys have presented the project. Bob, do you want to start us off?
So my only question is, so you will be removing both the shed and the deck?
No, we would like to keep the shed because we use it for storage. If we have to remove it, we will. But remove the deck off the shed and the concrete patio that's in front, that the table sits on the patio table. And then beside the shed, there's another concrete area where the barrels go and the bikes go.
So,
We'd take all that out and put grass back in there, but if possible, we'd like to maintain the shed just for storage purposes.
We
so
keep
on the plan that was submitted, it said that the shed is being removed. Was that being removed for lot coverage or having something to do with the septic system?
That input was done by the person that was giving us a price for doing the building. The architect that drew the plans said that it might be a good idea if we could keep that. It would be up to your decision. I mean, we would remove it if we have to remove it.
So do you know if the lot coverage percentages he has on here do include that being removed?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know.
All right, that's my only question.
Ed, any questions?
No questions.
Ken?
Well, I'm guessing that the lot coverage is, because, so this, the plan shows the lot coverage going from 31.5% down to 28.4%. And that's lot coverage by structures. I don't know if the concrete pads count as structures. Do you know, Noreen?
It might be
'Cause if
under
it's a
the,
patio,
it might be under the parking paving section as
yeah, they would
opposed to-
certainly count there, but they might not count as structures. So I'm just thinking this reduction from 31.5 to 28.4, which is favorable, and makes it easy to approve, probably means that the shed is being removed, according
well,
to the plans you submitted.
If necessary to get the bathroom, we will take down the shed. I personally would rather keep it for storage purposes. Or like when the baby's down, we put the carriage in there and the bikes in there.
But, you know, I think,
I don't
I
wanna- sure
shouldn't
you know
speak
what
for the
shed's
board,
for.
but
Yeah.
I think we're sympathetic to the project. We just would like the plan to be accurate in
Well,
terms of.
we, at the time when my parents built the addition, the shed was already on there, so the building inspection was given with that 10-by-10 shed there. And then we went over the lottage when they granted us the building permit. We had put like a deck on it because we had some rocking chairs out there and people would sit there when we were at the table and, so that took up more room. We didn't know that was an issue. It was stairs to get into the shed.
So is it accurate to say that all you're really adding is a 6-by-9 addition?
Yes,
Yes.
That's 54 square feet.
54 square feet, yes. That's all we're adding. It
The lot
backs-
is 4,515 square feet.
Yeah, which is news to us, because everybody on Silver Beach Ave on that side was always told that their lots were 55 by 95. But evidently, which, we had a plot plan done in 1994 by Warwick and Associates, and we were told that our lot was 55 by 95, as everybody from the Silver Beach assumed that they had. Now I'm being told that there was a court decision in 1917 that
17, okay.
actually our land was not our
Yeah,
land.
it's
And we
55
had,
by 85.
so we're actually taxed on 55 by 95 and have been since 1961.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna use that land that I think is mine, because it just, I
Ryle
think what,
Harbor Estates has a fence up in the back that separates everybody's backyard on that side of Silver Beach Ave, which actually extends the land, the lot, a little bit further.
Yeah, I see that on the plan. Well, if you weren't removing the shed, you're adding about 1.3% lot coverage, according to my calculation. So I just think the plan needs to be accurate, that's all. You know, if we're gonna approve it, and you,
That it should say that It does say that the shed's coming down.
This says the shed comes down and your
Okay,
total,
if it-
and your lot coverage by structures goes from 31.5 to 28.4.
If that's what it takes to have it approved, we'll take it down.
We're not saying,
Not gonna approve it?
no, it's not my turn to talk.
I'm not sure that, how the board feels. Personally, it's such a minor change and, you know,
It's
I
a
don't
minor
have any
change.
heartburn over it with the shed in place.
The reason for it, I think, is a valid reason, even though maybe not for building purposes it is, but
I
for us
mean,
it is.
did you get the letter from the doctor that,
It certainly increases the usability of your house in that
And
sense.
we have medical documentation saying that we're not making this up, you know?
All right, well, anyway, my questions were related to what is the true lot coverage.
well, that's something that we're gonna have to talk to the assessors about, and I think everybody on, I don't know how many houses it involves, but if that's true, and everybody has believed that they had 55 by 95 for, you know, we've been there since 1961, that's,
Probably nobody there who's been there since 1917.
yeah,
No.
yeah, I don't think so.
Not in the middle of World War I. That's kind of interesting that it's a court then.
Okay, that's it for me.
All right, Ken.
It's,
Jerry?
I concur with my colleague here. He's learning with my tutelage. So it's your preference to keep the shed
It is.
and to keep the deck in front of it?
No,
Or you want to take the deck down?
I'll take
Yes.
the deck down.
Would you
and I'll
want to
even
keep the
take
deck?
concrete out if it's need be.
Would you want to
Let
keep the
him-
deck?
Let's let him take the deck down.
It makes it a narrow, if I take the deck off, it'll be much more room.
Okay, all right.
right, so
So I'm probably
we're
gonna
willing
take
to
it
take it off.
Okay.
Yeah,
Take it down 'cause the leach
And then
is
you know you have to submit a revised plan.
A what?
a
You'll have to
revised
submit a
plan,
revised plan.
like get another, the architect to draw up another one, or is it another plot
No, the
plan?
architect drew the
Whoever
addition.
drew this, we just have to show that the shed is staying.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
I don't know whether it can be just a letter change. I think we'd rather have a plan, right?
Well, it needs to be a-
Okay. I have no other comments.
All right.
Is it, so you think we're all set with
Wait,
the,
let them speak.
oh, sorry.
No, it's all right. I think you can see where the board's leaning right now.
Is that, I'll get to, how soon should we submit the new plan and who should we submit it to?
Well, we'll hold on that for right now. We're gonna turn it to public comment, see if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns regarding the project, and maybe we can go along with the hearing process. We might chat and figure it out. So,
Okay.
for right now, members of the public, any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project tonight? Okay, seeing none. Back to the board.
So I don't,
Would anyone like to
yeah, I don't,
start off?
I don't have any issues either if they need it for storage, because they've got limited storage. The only question I have is regarding the deck, is that because of the location, how close it is to the leach field? Is there another reason that he's removing the deck? I mean, it looks like it's within 10
It is
feet.
close.
It was recommended
happen to
to
know?
us to, say that we would remove some of these items that were mentioned on the plan.
I got a question. What is the deck used for functionally?
It's used as a step to get into the shed, and they put chairs on it in the summertime when they're sitting out there. The concrete patio is right in front of the deck, so they have the table with the patio chairs, and then some other people may sit up on the deck.
But we haven't had the rocking chairs up there for
I mean,
a couple of years.
I don't have a
It's not
problem with the
something
deck.
that
I
we
think it's
use.
functionally
Well, no,
okay.
I don't
The
have a problem-
concrete patios.
I don't have the problem with the deck, it's just that usually within a leach field, you have 10 feet. So I just didn't know if there was another reason he was
that-
taking it off.
Was there a board
The
of health
nice-
comment, Bob? I think you,
Board of Health has to. do
Well, no,
something
just that
different.
they'll eventually, if they have
The
to,
leach pit.
if they have to do a,
It's not a,
It's I think
Oh,
the Board
leach
of Health-
pit, yeah, no,
the-
leach
The
field,
Board
leach
of
field.
Health will address that at the appropriate time.
but if I can say, the nice thing about removing the deck is that gets you 60 square feet. And you're adding 54 square feet. So your lot coverage actually goes down by 1/10 of 1%.
Right.
So that's nice, because we always like to say you're getting, more conforming when you make changes. And
Okay.
even 1 1/10 of 1% counts.
Okay,
Okay.
so
You seem to want to do it anyway, so that's
I
great.
think it'll be tight. Even
we
though
don't
we're
do
only
it.
going over that little bit, it'll be tight walking by.
So there you
And
go. So you get rid of the deck, and then you can keep the shed, and all is great.
That sounds good to me, thanks.
Sounds good to me. Everyone amenable for the shed to remain?
Yeah,
and
that's
if
fine.
they remove the
I'd
deck
like the
instead?
shed and deck to remain, I don't think.
He doesn't want the deck to remain.
After you browbeated him in, I mean.
No, no, no. He's not, it's not my
The racket
browbeating.
chairs, they'll
He
stay.
said he thought it'd be tight.
It's gonna be, it's no tighter than it is now.
Anyway,
Let him take
Terry.
it out if he wants. Well, let's move on to approve it, and then we
Yes.
can
Well,
discuss
first we
conditions.
need to close.
I'll move to close.
Second.
Motion to close by Ken, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
And what would be the board's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We'll give that one to Jerry. Yep. All right, moving on to findings.
I think we find this will increase the utility of the house, usability of the house, that the applicant is amenable to removing the deck, which will result in a reduction of 60 square feet of lot coverage while adding a proposed addition that is the addition of 54 square feet with a net loss of 6 square feet.
I guess I'm opposed.
Precise finding, Ken.
I'm opposed to that
Well,
finding.
I'm not, I made the motion, I'm telling you what my findings are.
Well,
Those
okay,
are the
I thought-
findings. And
Well, I said it, but
the applicant's amenable, he said it, Jerry. Jerry,
I
it's-
want to have a discussion
You
on
can
that.
discuss it. And then, as a condition, I would make the condition that we ask for a revised plan to reflect those changes. With the
Yeah,
appropriate-
by the revised plan, you mean the plot plan that
Yes.
just does not say remove,
An accurate plot
Shed.
plan
okay,
that shows what you're actually gonna do.
okay, because I actually do have one that does not have the things that were to be removed.
You can submit it to Noreen afterwards.
Okay,
Now, can I discuss things? I think they've had it there for this long, the deck. I think it's not good governance to have them take down a deck. If they want to take it down, let them take it down. It was clear he wanted to get this approved. And if you ever wanted to get something approved, you usually try to approve the board members. I would like to remove that and make a condition that he can remove the deck if he wants to. It's up to him. And I changed the finding, I guess.
You can't change the finding, that's what they said.
I disagree. They said, okay, and I said that I think
So
they
you
would
want
like
to
to
change the
stay.
condition?
Yes, and I think they were pushed into that finding, because they wanted to get an approval. He said, well, if I have to, I'll take it out. You know, that's a coerced submission. They obviously want it, they obviously need it. I don't think it's a big deal to take that out of the finding. You could say there's some discrepancies. I guess we should have board discussion. I mean, I hate to see it in the finding, and then we're gonna have a condition say they don't have to do it. So we either, I can disagree with the finding, can't I?
I mean,
If they were willing to remove the deck, I'd like to see it removed, only because it's somewhat of a reduction.
yeah, they're at
And the health,
31.
and the health department has mentioned that if they ever need to replace the septic anyways, they're already gonna be in a variance issue.
But they can let the future dictate what the future dictates. Give these people a chance to do what they want.
So once it exists, what if somebody decides to take the house down and use that as extra space to build
Well,
a
they
new
have to
structure?
come in, any change to this, they have to come in anyways. That's a standard condition. We're gonna say if they want to, they can take the deck down, or if they don't. And they could, all I'm saying is put it in a condition that it's their option to take the deck off.
I understand where you're coming from, Jerry, but I think Ken's finding and condition, I would support it.
All right, let's move on.
It's a minor change that they agreed to, although I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I would just point out there, You know, the maximum allowable lot coverage under the bylaw is 25%. They're 31.5%, which I understand there's grandfathered on. And, you know, we'd be going to 31.4 about, so it's an improvement. And it's nice for us to be able to cite that.
I guess I disagree, but we'll go along with the majority so we can approve this.
Right. There any other findings and conditions? I know we're a little all over the
So
place
we've
on
asked
this.
for revised plan
Right.
and removal of the deck
Mhm.
as conditions. I think that, anyone think of anything else?
And Noreen will get to them what the revised plan has to be.
Okay, great.
Stamp plan, a sketch, or whatever.
Yeah, I think she has one, just doesn't have the removal part on it.
That's all you gotta do is update this.
Yeah, he just has to update this.
I mean, she might be able to just cross it out and sign it. You know, it's not an engineering detail.
On a certified plan, that would go over big.
It's all right.
All right, so motion to approve was made by Ken and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Okay, thanks very much.
Welcome. Okay, up next, we have application 12-19, Hoagland, 30 Davis Neck Road in East Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Mass General Laws, you are hereby notified that Paul V. and Bonnie A. Hoagland of East Falmouth, Mass. applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-69E of the Code of Falmouth to construct additions exceeding 20% lot coverage by structures on subject property known as 30 Davis Neck Road, East Falmouth. Engineering. There's the normal comments from engineering regarding dry wells, rain garden, et cetera, but there's an additional comment. During a site inspection for this application, DPW engineering personnel noted unpermitted work within the town right-of-way that also does not meet the standards as follows. There's a gravel strip along the roadway. DPW standards require either loam or seed or 1-foot solid surface against the pavement edge of the roadway. The strip should be removed. The strip could be reset behind a 1-foot asphalt or concrete edge along the roadway surface with an approved permit from engineering. The step should butt the edge of the pavement and be flush. A snowplow can hit this and damage the plow itself. This step should be removed. The step could be reset flush, and the gap between the roadway and step should be filled with asphalt or concrete flush with the roadway surface with an approved permit from engineering. Placement of the step within the town right-of-way may or may not require a license from the selectmen. This would be determined during a permit application review. There's a cobblestone apron. Cobble aprons are allowed in the first 5 feet from the pavement edge. However, they are supposed to be set back a minimum of 1 foot with asphalt or concrete abutting the road surface. These cobbles are also raised and could cause plow damage. The cobble apron should be removed. The cobbles could be reset behind a 1-foot asphalt or concrete apron against the roadway surface with an approved permit from engineering. We request that before action is taken on the special permit, the ZBA require the applicant to come into engineering with plans and file a permit to remove the above permitted work in the town right-of-way. If the applicant wishes, the same permit can cover reinstalling these site features per town standards. Health Department, recent 3-bedroom septic system was installed. The plans show an office that meets Title V definition of a bedroom. We suggest a non-standard cased opening in the office to eliminate privacy. Setback to existing septic system to proposed addition is fine since it is proposed slab. Assessors, no comment. Fire Department, no comment. Water Department, 3-quarter copper service line must be upgraded to a 1-inch plastic because there's a footprint change. Planning Board, no comment. And no letters of One letter of concern, no letters of support or opposition. And Kevin did submit a lot comparison worksheet.
And for the applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ament Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent the applicants Paul and Bonnie Hoagland, the owners of 30 Davis Neck Road. Mr. Hoagland is here with me this evening. They're seeking to add an addition to their single-family dwelling. This property is located on Davis Neck Road, south of Minot, on a lot of about exactly 10,000 square feet in the residential B zoning district. The applicants have owned property in Falmouth for about 5 years, but have purchased this property in 2017, and they've been working on renovating it since that time. They're both now mostly retired. They've sold their family home in Hopkinton and are seeking to make this their full-time residence. But in order to do so, they need to make some changes to the property, to the footprint, and to the layout, in order to make it suitable for their family and their needs. The existing house is a 1.5-story single-family dwelling with a footprint of just shy of 1,300 square feet. It's conforming as to setbacks and lot coverage. The existing ridge height is 17 feet 7 inches. This addition to the first floor living space will create a full-size kitchen, which is, as opposed to the existing small galley, provide an office as they do both work part-time. It will expand their living space in the sense of a living room, a den, and some additional storage. And it will improve the existing first-floor master. This will allow for continued single-story living. To borrow a phrase that was just used, this will allow them to age in place when that time does come. These changes improve the usefulness of the property significantly. It is and will remain a 3-bedroom home. There's no new nonconformity created, but the resulting lot coverage by structure is 22.1%, which is over the 20% that is allowed by right, but under the 25% allowed by special permit. This increase in lot coverage does require a special permit under section 240-69E. This allows the board to grant a special permit for lot coverage exceeding 20%, but less than 25, and ask the board to consider the size and height of the structure relative to the average size and height of structures in the neighborhood, the effect of shadow on adjacent properties, the impacts on views and vistas from public ways, and the effect of nitrogen on coastal embayments. As I mentioned, the proposed lot coverage on this will be 22.1%, which is well within the range that's permitted. The lot coverage by structures, paving, and parking will be 26.4, well under the 40% that is allowed by right. There's no impacts on views and vistas. The house will not be considerably more visible than present from the public way. The ridge height for the addition is on one side 18 feet 11 and a half inches, which is slightly higher than the existing ridge height, but well underneath the 35% that's allowed. There's no negative impact on the view from the public ways. We have submitted a comparison chart showing lot size, footprint, gross building area, and lot coverage by structure of the homes within a 300-foot radius. Of those 29 homes, 11 have a larger footprint, 20 have a larger gross building area. The average footprint is 2,170 square feet. We're proposing a footprint of 2,214, a difference of 44 square feet off the mean. The average gross building area is 4,329 square feet. We're proposing 2,888, far below the average for the area. When considered relative to the other properties, the footprint is almost exactly average, and the gross building area is far smaller. There's no effect on nitrogen levels, as it will remain a 3-bedroom. Into the health department's referral, I think the applicant would be more than happy to have a case opening on the office to ensure that it remains a 3-bedroom. We are, of course, aware of the engineering referral in the abutter letter. As to the engineering referral, these cited issues do predate the applicant's ownership. It's unclear when they occurred, but certainly prior to the Hoagland's ownership. That being said, they will, of course, address them if this board requires it. They prefer to leave things as is, but they will take whatever steps this board feels is necessary. Regarding the abutter, there were some concerns about the addition on the southerly side of the lot. And those concerns are relative to the excavation of the basement and the effect it might have on a Japanese fir located on her property. I think it's important to note that the addition on that side is 19 feet from the property line, much farther than the 10-foot setback that's allowed. And the addition on that side will be built on slab with minimal excavation. So relative to the consideration set forth in the bylaw, The proposed addition to the dwelling will not have any adverse effects that outweigh its beneficial effects. There are no detriments to this project, and certainly none that would be considered substantially more detrimental than what presently exists. For these reasons, I believe this board can and should grant the special permit, and I'd be happy to address any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you, Attorney Clower. Jerry, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I guess we always come up with the question that there are engineering deficiencies, lack of a better word, that need to be corrected. Would you be, and I'm not sure the board were amenable to a condition that says before occupancy permit can be issued, before building construction initiated, those engineering deficiencies will be submitted and corrected?
I think a potential solution might be that they have to obtain a permit to do so, because that's what the engineering department requested, that they come in and get a permit to do it. I think that would
But
be.
my question was, obviously have to get a permit.
Mhm.
Question is, do we hold up
Well,
this
of course.
approval if we wanted to grant the approval subject to that condition? And that was, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I would certainly prefer you not. It's the first engineering referral I've ever seen with Avast that the board not taken action. I was surprised when that came in that manner. We are, of course, amenable to addressing engineering's concerns. The applicant would like to keep the cobblestone apron, but it sounds as though, based on engineering's referral, that that's possible with some minor changes in the appropriate permit.
I understand that.
Yep.
Anything else, Jerry?
Nope.
Ken?
So, Jerry, you're also referring to the gravel and stuff in the right-of-way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole,
So that, yeah, that should all be, I mean, the engineer, we don't usually get referrals that specifically ask for things to be remedied before we approve. I think we have to take those pretty seriously. But that doesn't mean that it can't be approved with that condition in place.
Sure. And that's what I would hope that the board
Yeah.
would do.
And the shed is also to be removed, is that correct?
They are willing to remove it, and even harkening back to a recent application. I mean, even with the shed that'd be at 22.9% lot coverage, they have shown it as being removed. The applicant and I have discussed it even prior to tonight, not just because of tonight's discussion. We discussed that one possibility might be to move forward with it being removed, and if he didn't in fact decide he wanted to keep it, to come back for an administrative approval at some point, because it is well within the permittable range, and given that this house is, the footprint in the gross building area is so well within the appropriate size, that I think that would be possible. But that being said, the plan does note that it's being removed, and if they're gonna remove, if that's, again, a board condition, they will.
And it's located from, how far from the lot lines?
It looks to be 4.7 and 8.3, and it's an 80-square-foot shed, so the requirement is 3-foot setbacks.
Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Those are my questions.
Ed?
No, I don't have any problem.
Bob?
No questions.
And Attorney Clara, forgive me if you already addressed it, but the space labeled the office and the referral regarding the case to opening
Happy to do it.
be And what size for the case opening?
Typically, it's a 4-foot case opening.
Thank you. Any other questions for the board at this time? All right, members of the,
I was just gonna say, given the discussion I had with Mr. Patamas and Mr. Foreman, I would ask that the board have discussion prior to closing, just so we understand where we're gonna be heading.
no problem with that. Members of the public, do you have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Seeing none, back to the board.
I can go along with what Ken and I agreed to, and they agreed, I don't think, to take it out, they can come back later and put it in if they want to, with an administrative approval, correct? I mean, they're gonna still have to do the engineering stuff,
You mean
the
with the-
condition.
Yeah, I think we both agree on
Yeah.
that.
Right, regarding the apron, right?
Or the apron and
And
the,
the
yeah.
Right, the
cobblestone, they're
The
concerned
plowing
about
is plowing is
plow
an issue.
damage,
Right.
Yeah.
right.
And since they agreed to remove the, deck.
So now, so engineer is asking also to just file the permit, so we could
Right.
condition that they actually file the permit.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone all right with that?
Appreciate it.
Motion to close then?
All right, motion to
Second.
close, made by Ken and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Ken and Jerry again. Findings?
Findings, let's incorporate the comments of the engineering department into the findings.
Sure.
And that the applicant's amenable to removing the shed, that they will put in a 4-foot, that they've agreed to put in a 4-foot cased opening in the entrance to the office, so as it won't be considered a bedroom. And I guess, obviously, this also increases the usability of the site, conforms to 24216. And then for conditions, we would ask for the 4-foot cased opening,
Condition on the engineering,
condition
that's-
based on the engineering.
I mean, they have to
To,
submit for a permit.
including
comply with the
filing a
permit.
permit.
Right. And that they remove the shed.
Okay.
And this is, how many bedrooms then? You want to,
So it's 3 and then staying at 3?
yeah. So maybe that's a
Finding.
a finding and a condition.
Any other findings or conditions?
You got it all covered.
Okay, that was a motion to approve made by Ken and second by Jerry. All
And
those in favor?
obviously as per plan.
For plans. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, up next we have application 13-19 Hackler, 8 Solar Way in Hatchville.
So being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Mass General Laws, you are hereby notified that Joseph L. Hackler of Hatchville, Mass. filed an appeal with the Falmouth Town Clerk pursuant to Mass General Law 40A, Sections 8 and 15, and 240-202 of the Code of Falmouth, appealing the building commissioner's determination to remove the pole barn structure on subject property known as 8 Solar Way, Hatchville, Mass.
Good evening, my name is Joe Hackler, and this is my wife Karen Schwalbe, and we are part of the Alpha Farm Neighborhood Association, originally a community of people that organized to develop a clustered zoning subdivision, and we apparently have run into trouble with our neighbors, and they complained. We proposed this pole barn structure as an agricultural use, and got approval by the community and got approval by the town to put up the structure. Then it turned out that the neighbors became unhappy about it and complained to the town, and because the project was constructed as, under the cluster zoning provision of the bylaw, technically what we had put up was not permitted. And I had actually had an attorney advise me and do a letter to the building commissioner at the time before he approved it, and he was convinced at that time that that would be a permissible use. Turns out that it wasn't. And so, at this point in time, because of the complaint, the building commissioner issued this order to have it removed. And I've since spoken with him, and he said he would be amenable to converting the building permit application from an agricultural use, which is not conforming under the cluster zoning provision of the bylaws, to a residential use, but that I would need to resubmit for a residential structure. I need to submit a new building permit, and that I'm in process with that, and have developed some conceptual drawings of that use and have run them by the building commissioner. And he said, that's good, maybe you should just go and respectfully request a continuance. And so that I can continue working on these plans and working out whether it's possible that he would eventually approve a building permit application, a conversion of the building permit application from the non-conforming agricultural use that originally was approved to a residential use, which is what the intent of the community was all along and is completely conforming. So if we could have a continuance for 30 or 60 days, that would be fantastic to help us, work this issue out.
Okay, so ultimately, tonight, you're looking for a continuance tonight?
Please.
Okay.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah.
That is easy,
Yeah,
isn't it?
that's easy.
It's easier than agreeing with the building commissioner.
Or disagreeing.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to make the motion that we grant a continuance.
Second it.
We need a
How
date,
far out are we looking?
set up to 30 days, so.
30 or 60, he said.
Do you,
60 would not be a problem with us.
What do we have?
do you think that would be
I
to your benefit if we push it out a full 60?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
Can I-
wait, June 13th is the next meeting, right? That's not 60, but it's not more than 30.
We are also looking at June 27th as a
Yeah.
meeting date. That's the last one we've got scheduled at this point in time.
Continue to June 27th?
Could I ask a question, or is it closed?
No, we haven't closed.
I just had one question. So the structure that's there now, and it's got the photovoltaics and the electricity, are there any other issues with what's already been constructed as far as hazards or anything that,
Not to my knowledge,
building
no.
commissioner?
No, it's a fully engineered, fully conforming structure, yeah.
okay, I just wanted to check, make sure.
The June 27th date is not a good date for me.
Okay. We have not scheduled any July dates, but
Not the 4th.
It wouldn't be the 4th.
Skip
The
the 4th.
11th?
July 11th? Is that okay?
Yes.
I'll move that they'd like continuance.
There's a person who wanted to ask a question. I don't know if we take questions and continuances.
Not tonight,
Okay.
since they're just asking for a continuance.
I did mean to do that.
Yes, you do.
No worries, Jerry.
July 11th,
Yeah, I'll second it.
here in Town Hall, 6:30 here in Town.
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So we just need to vote on it.
Yep.
Motion was made by Ken, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Can you just pass me the mini plans?
Mini plans.
Yeah. The mini plans.
Saves paper. You can
that?
print them on a book.
It's hard to read, but other than that.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have a font thing in the future.
I think that is, that's a reduction of the actual. Yeah, I meant to ask that. So how's it on lot coverage? See all these ones with bigger footprints are on bigger lots.
you guys need one? I wasn't gonna throw this down the table.
Oh. Thanks.
Okay, and up next, we have application 115-18, Woods Hole Partners LLC, 533 Woods Hole Road in Woods Hole. Noreen, before we start, Noreen, I have a notation here that we need this.
Part of this.
Yes,
Was that executed on the last date, or do we?
yes,
do
so
we need it
if
returned, or-
if you continue beyond today, you need to
We
get that.
would need another one. Okay, thank you.
This is gonna hash contours. Who needs a work ethic?
Other projects give us slides and we can look at.
Come up here.
Good?
Whenever you're ready, Attorney Clower.
Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ament Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent the applicants Woods Hole Partners LLC. I'm here tonight with my partner, Bob Ament, as well as Mark Bogosian, one of the managers of Woods Hole Partners, as well as Matt Costa of Cape and Islands Engineering. We're glad to be here tonight, and we're hoping to move this matter forward. As was just noted, we did receive a site plan approval from the planning board earlier this week, so we feel as though there's a little bit of momentum building. Since the last hearing, there have been no significant changes to the plans, though additional information has been submitted to both engineering, the planning board, and this board as well. Just prior to last meeting, though, we did submit some changes to the plans, and I'm hoping that you've all had the chance to review them since that time. As I'm on that note, I am going to submit two things now. They were minor changes to the grading and drainage plans that were done for planning board. We just want to make sure the board has a full set. And also, I have a copy of the letter and the plan that's in front of me right now in response to conservation that I will submit, and I'll go over all that momentarily. So I'd like to review some of the information at hand, give an overview of of the project, where it stands right now, essentially a state of the project. As I believe you know, Town Council did issue an opinion last week in which he stated that he concurred with our position relative to the building height limitation in the business redevelopment district. His opinion states that the language is unambiguous and there's no reference to the 2.5 stories within that district. We're hopeful that that opinion, coupled with the building commissioner's opinion and the case law that we had previously provided, is enough to assuage your concerns regarding that particular issue. At the urging of an abutter, Conservation Commission did visit the property and located a coastal bank and a wetland on Hui property off the northwest corner of the site. Conservation conveyed those concerns to Ms. Stockman earlier this week, and our engineer has had a chance to review and submitted correspondence earlier today, as well as the physical copies that were just sent in, showing that the buffers for both the coastal bank and the wetland, though they do extend onto the property slightly, and you can see the wetland buffer here shown in green and the coastal bank buffer shown in blue, though they do extend slightly onto the property, both are outside the limit of work and don't impact the project. With regards to the plans, I want to make some brief comments on the changes. Previously, Building A and E were modified slightly in order to correct the height issue that we discussed at the last hearing, and that those changes resulted in some downstream adjustments to the grading and the drainage. Building D was shifted further, which is this one here located the closest to the street, was shifted further away from the street. That change eliminated any potential decreases to the view shed. We had anticipated a potential loss of 2 degrees of the view shed to and from the dome, but with that change to the building, that's no longer an issue. That change, though, did alter the parking to the rear slightly. In response, we moved some of the parking spots to within Building E. The eastern entrance of the site, at the request of DOT, those curb cuts, the radiuses were changed. That change had the result of widening the entire driveway on that side of the lot. The landscaping plan was revised as well in response to some of the expressed concerns from the Fern Lane abutters. The plantings include more fast-growing and shade-hardy varieties. Now, though it's not a change, I think it's important to note that the limit of work on the hill that people have expressed concern about is very significantly far away from the property line. Most of the existing vegetation that's there will remain in its present condition and density. Earlier, we had made changes to Building E, which is the building closest to the dome. Those changes reduced the size by altering and shrinking the floor plans internally, and had the result of shifting the building further away from the dome, increasing that setback from 18 feet to 27 feet. The setback to the lot line to Building E also increased, 22 feet to 26 feet at the porch and 27 feet to 31 feet at the corner of the building. As it stands now, the entirety of Building E will be behind the line of the present building. There were also some changes to the design of the exteriors of the duplexes and the affordable units. The applicants also agreed to restore and improve the sidewalk along the length of the property in order to meet ADA standards. I think it's important to focus on some of the basics of this application. We're seeking a permissible special permit. A lot of the concerns that have been expressed say this is a variance. It's not a variance, it's a special permit application. The density of 8 units per acre is allowable by special permit. 6 units per acre is allowed by right. Town meeting rezoned this property in 2007 expressly to allow this density, and that change was supported by the Woods Hole Community Association for the purpose of creating the Wise Living Development. That project, which was permitted, allowed for 8 units per acre, all at market rate in a much larger building. Our modification to the covenant, done about a year and a half ago, didn't change the density. It only allowed the units to be in multiple buildings as opposed to one large monolithic structure. This property is abutted to the west and the east by non-conforming hotels. Those hotels have densities of 23 and 28 bedrooms per acre, respectively, which is greater than what we're proposing. To say this project is too dense under the bylaw or in comparison with the nearby properties is simply false. The proposed lot coverage by structures, paving, and parking is 41%, which is well below the 60% that's allowed by right. It's worth mentioning, this is not the original design the applicant came up with. This is not the original design the applicant was seeking to use. When they purchased this in 2016, it's not what they were seeking to do. This design that you see before you only came about after a year plus of negotiation with the Woods Hole Community Association, after we were prodded in this direction by the Community Association, when they expressed this is what they wanted to see at the site. At the very first hearing in January, I said, we believe this is a good plan, even a great plan, but it cannot be and does not need to be perfect in every way to everyone. This is the plan that's being presented. It's been modified after negotiations and discussions by the Woods Hole Community Association, by comments from the Planning Board, and by comments from this board. We think it's an excellent plan, and we think it presents the best chance for the preservation of the dome, the revitalization of a long-neglected parcel of land that should be a pristine location in town. I believe that the board has sufficient information and testimony, both to address previously expressed concerns and questions, and to close the hearing, and ideally issue a special permit. I, along with the other members of our team, would be happy to address any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Attorney Flower. Jerry, do you want to start us off?
No, why don't you start at the other end?
Have you decided on a use for the dome?
Not specifically, because we're still, I think we submitted correspondence earlier, which outlined a number of the potential uses. The ultimate fallback would be that it be used by the condominium association with public access on some limited basis, and could be made available to the Woods Hole Community Association for their meetings as needed. But that would be at a bare minimum. We are still considering potential uses such as artist studios. We would be open to working with a nonprofit that wanted to use it in various ways. But we believe that it can be permitted with a condition that any change outside of use by the condominium association would require a modification to the permit. And that's true under any circumstance anyways.
So in this case, let's say you did go for a modification at some point, it was approved. You needed additional parking somewhere on the site. Where on this site could that be modified?
I'll let Bob speak to this.
For your record, I'm Bob Ament and co-counsel with Kevin Clower, of course. There is room to create additional parking on the driveway into the, below the dome. There could be parking there. It's wide enough to cut into the slope a bit. There could be parallel park on one side and the perpendicular. So there could be a few more parking spaces. There might be also room to expand that to get a couple more spaces instead of the 8 that are shown. Now, we don't anticipate needing to do that. We don't want to have intense uses of the dome. And in addition to the parking limitation, there's a limitation in the amount of sewage waste capacity, because there's only, I think it's about 230, I might be off a little bit on that, gallons per day that's available between what the requirements are for the residences and the and 10,000 gallons, which is the limit that we can put on there by our covenant, and without putting in a totally different kind of septic system. So we're limited by septic and we're limited by parking. But keep in mind that in the business redevelopment district, a parking reduction is encouraged in appropriate cases, and the Board of Appeals is specifically authorized to reduce the, is it the Board of Appeals or the Planning Board? You can reduce the parking by 50%. So we'd like to be able to have small meetings if the community association wanted to do that. The requirement for meeting space is 1 parking space for every 3 people. With only 8 spaces, that only provides for 24 people. But for, if there were, for instance, 14 spaces, or the board said you can have uses that would allow up to that. Because it's Woods Hole, there is other parking available in the vicinity. People can walk to things. So maybe there could be somewhat more capacity. We're not looking for an intense use. We just simply like to have a little bit of discretion so that in talking to other nonprofits, besides we have talked to an artist group, we've talked, of course, to the community association, and of course the building won't be able to be occupied probably for 3 or more years, so it's tough to line up exactly what its use would be other than for the residents of the condominium. But we'd like a little bit of flexibility. 1 space for every 250 square feet is the standard that would apply for office-type use or for artist studios, for instance. The dome contains about 2,200 square feet, so right there, that would be 9 spaces. We're proposing to build about a 500 square foot footprint, but almost 1,000 square feet on the 2 floors, an access building, which is primarily and mostly containing an elevator, stairs, handicap bathrooms, a little bit of storage, and then there's a foyer, and that's what's in that building. It's all supporting public access to the dome. But if we count that 1,000 square feet, it's a little bit more than that, there's 5 parking spaces required right there. So I really think that the board could comfortably give us a little bit of discretion in saying as long as your use, and we also specify we're only talking about nonprofit uses. That's all we would propose. I mean, we could come back and ask for a change. It's a business redevelopment district, and mixed use is encouraged. But we're only talking about nonprofit uses, and my suggestion, and it was this suggestion made to the planning board as well, which did not accept it, hopefully would in the future, is that there be a figure, I think I suggested 15 parking spaces, it might have been 14, that As long as we don't exceed that, keep in mind, 5 of them are just to get into the building. That's nonprofit uses that don't require more than 14 or 15 spaces. We would like you to allow that without our having to come back. Yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to say we don't know exactly what it will be.
Tell me
which is-
what's the status with your historic application? Has that been submitted, or what's the?
No, it hasn't been submitted. We felt it was very important to be through with the zoning. The historical application will involve a lot of detail, a lot of planning, and a whole different set of experts dealing with the state and the town. The Cape Cod Commission, which has experts in historic preservation, has approved the revisions, but we are obligated to present to them a preservation restriction approved by the state, as well as a maintenance plan to show how we're going to, in perpetuity, take care of the dome. Those restrictions would be perfectly fine as conditions of the Board of Appeals as well, because we have to do those things.
I wanted to,
That's all I have right now.
just one additional comment on that is, in the business redevelopment, you can have parking within 300 feet of the site. So there could be parking elsewhere not located on this site. And that also in terms of reducing the parking, there may well be a lot of the use generated from residents who would not need the parking at the dome itself. So there's a number of factors in play there.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So last meeting was mentioned on the 2 duplexes that the driveways in front could be considered parking in a front yard. How are you handling that?
They're not required parking. The parking that's required for those buildings is located within the building itself. So those spaces aren't being counted as the parking spaces?
So would you have a restriction in the covenants that say that people cannot park in the?
No, people
driveways?
could park there, but I think the front yard parking refers to required parking spaces. My understanding.
Right, that's all I have.
I have a couple of questions on this concept plan that was attached to the letter the day before yesterday. The item 5 says, link the dome to the senior living facility. Is that I didn't see any of that in the drawings.
Well, the document you're looking at was prepared in 2008
Right.
for the Wise Living project that included the dome as an attachment. For a number of reasons, which we think are good, the dome will be a standalone structure and won't be as overpowered by the very big building. So that's an example of a provision that would have to be, well, we wouldn't be following that condition.
Right. Okay, so this needs to be updated. The item 10 on this list, it says, you're talking about connecting, I'll read it. Develop function to the dome that is compatible with a senior living facility such as multi-purpose room that could function as a media room, meeting room, library, et cetera. Why not just go with that and say that's what we're gonna do and at the end of the conversation?
Well, that could be the way it ends up if we don't come up with something better that involves a regular public access to the dome. We spent the better part of a year having discussions with a nonprofit that was interested in creating an arts center. Some of the goals and the scope of that were not compatible. But we think that there could be a different use. If the Board of Appeals said we don't want any other use of that dome other than as accessory residential space, that is a residence clubhouse, exercise area, meeting space, we can live with that. The covenant amendment with the Woods Hole Foundation specifies that there ought to be the opportunity for community association meetings. We don't have a problem with that. If it was a meeting space in the condominium, it wouldn't be unusual at all for somebody to say a nonprofit could use the space. So if that's understood, that'd be okay with us too. So we don't have a real problem with that. We just think that there was a lot of interest by one group in basically taking over the operation, and that's not going to happen in that way. So we don't know exactly what it'll be. If the board feels we should limit it, that's okay.
Cut down on the traffic and the lack of parking spot problem.
Well, but we don't have, we have 8 parking spaces. We want to have some that's dedicated already. A lot of the residences are going to be seasonal, or some of them anyway. I think there will be some extra spaces on the site. We want to have some public access, even if it's only the weekly tours by the local historical collection. And exactly what it'll work out really will depend on public demand. What do people want from it? But if the board were to limit it to the kind of use, just association use, occasional visitation by the public, we can live with that, come back to the board if something else comes along that we want to do. But I don't think that condition, which is the condition that the planning board imposed, I don't think that is a deal stopper. We do have to make sure that the community association agrees, and if it's the understanding that occasional meetings of a community association would be allowed within that, with a small number of people, that'd be okay.
Okay, that's all for now.
All right. Ken?
Couple of questions. So a lot of times with respect to, anticipated parking needs, we ask that the plan show reserve, basically where these parking places would go. Would you be amenable to putting those on the plan?
That's for the by right parking reduction allowed
I
under.
understand,
Yeah.
but you're talking about adding somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 spaces that are unspecified.
Well,
as to where they
six
would-
spaces, I think, would be the number, because there's 8 existing, so Bob was talking about 14 spaces, so I think 6 additional is the number.
And I was suggesting that under the bylaw, a use that requires 14 spaces could be allowed with half that number of spaces. So I think we
Well,
have
so,
room to
do you want to have the spaces or not want to have the spaces?
I think we would like to have the discretion to use the dome for a number that's a little more than 8 spaces, but not have to show
Why
on the
not
plan.
show where these might go?
Well,
You don't have to build them.
I think the issue is that the construction of the spaces would involve significant grade change.
As I said, you don't have to build
Sure.
them. We just want to see where they would go.
I think we could, between now and when the board were to sign a decision, I bet we could come up with some language that would work for that, to give us a little more. I mean, if all we have is the right to use it for residences and other uses up to 8 parking spaces, because that's what we have, I think we can go forward with that, but we wanted a little bit more flexibility.
And I think that we can show some additional spaces on a plan, if that would address your concern.
So then regarding the location of parking, and I'll just read from the bylaw, under parking requirements, it says, "All parking shall be located in the side or rear yards behind the front facade of the building." And then it goes on to say the exact location behind the front facade to be determined by site plan review. It does not say all required parking.
So, did you want to respond? Yeah, I mean, if the board was going to condition it that there be no parking there, I don't think it's necessary, but they of course could. But I think it's also worth pointing out that this area is not visible from the street because of the grade of.
I understand, but the business redevelopment bylaw, which is what you're building under, and which grants you that extra, and I think quite validly, extra density, really was pretty clear on this. And the idea was, again, we didn't want to have in business redevelopment districts, we wanted something more like the B1, where there's not parking in front of the building.
Sure. So if what's necessary is we condition that there not be parking there, then we can do that.
And so that also references buildings C and D where you have.
Yeah, I mean, that would be building C and D, for those two. I think those are the only two that it would be applicable to.
Okay, and then I did have a question about the historic certificate, and which buildings do you have to worry about that for?
Well, it would be B, C, D, and E, or within the 200-foot setback. But realistically, we're not going to design building A in a manner that's significantly different than we're going to design building C, D, and E. So whatever holds true for the ones that are in the historic district is likely going to be what holds true for all of those buildings in that area of the lot.
And is there, I mean, can you educate us a little on the precedent for getting zoning approval prior to getting your historic versus the other way around?
I'm not sure there's any requirement to do historic prior to zoning. There is a requirement to do planning prior to zoning. I don't believe there's any requirement to do historic prior to zoning. To the extent historic required any significant changes to the plans, or any changes to the plans, we'd either have to have them approved administratively or seek to modify our special permit.
Forgive us, because we've both been very involved in this for years, actually, and maybe we both have something to add. It is a fact that the Wise Living Project went to the Historical Commission and received a certificate of appropriateness, and that is still in effect. Now, we will be applying for a whole new hearing with regard to these plans, but when that decision was issued in 2009, 8, I think it was, there was no time limit on, which there is today, but there was no time limit on the certificate of appropriateness. It remains in effect, and I don't think it changes anything. We're going to proceed under the current regulations, but in a sense, we have a certificate of appropriateness, which we've submitted to the board for that. As I said before,
Weren't those entirely different buildings that you were building?
It's the site, it's the use of the site. Sure, we have to go back and modify that, just like we went back and have already modified the decision of the Cape Cod Commission for a totally different set of it. We have never suggested we won't be going back to the Falmouth Historical Commission, just as we will have dealings with the Massachusetts Historical Commission. What we hope you understand is that for us to be going and doing the very intensive work that will involve the historic preservation of this building, and we must have the preservation restriction and all the plans for what we're going to do, the detailed plans of that Deacon Marvel present summary. They're required by the Cape Cod Commission before we can get a building permit for that. There's a load of work to be done, and for us to have gone and done those details before we knew if we had zoning approvals really would have been a foolish thing to do. If we have our zoning approvals in place, as we surely hope we will, then we're going to turn our attention to those details. We have other experts who have already been engaged, people who already know the dome inside and out, literally, to work on what will happen, exactly how will it be done, because it's a pretty complex thing. A lot of people are scratching their heads about what actually to do. It's going to be, Mark Bogosian has estimated, in excess of $1 million spent on that restoration project. And the planning process is going to be detailed. So we weren't required to go to the Historical Commission first. We haven't done it. We know we have to. If there are any changes to the buildings of any material impact, we know we have to come back to get a modification of our, or administrative perhaps, or perhaps a modification of our special permit as well as site plan review.
Based on the use?
Say?
Based on the use for the dome you're talking about?
I don't think the use of the dome is going to have much to do at all with the Historical Commission.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, no, I think the last question I had pertained to you showed the buffer, the 100-foot buffer on the plan has that been determined by Conservation Commission, or was that your engineer, or how did that get up there?
I'll let the engineer speak about that one directly.
Letter from Concom.
Matt Costa, Cape and Islands Engineering. The buffer to the coastal bank was determined using the DEP's 92-1 coastal bank policy,
I've got it,
which has a slope criteria. So it's based on the topography.
yeah.
And we use that criteria to delineate the coastal bank.
And so have you gotten a determination from Conservation?
I've talked to Ms. McKay about this. We haven't reviewed the plan that we prepared today in detail, but it's pretty straightforward in that we use the topography and a basic slope criteria.
You know if they're gonna ask for a hearing, or?
I don't know, but even if there was a hearing, we're talking about buffer zone B area here, and there are no performance standards that would impact the project.
Right, that probably does it for my current questions.
Jerry, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Any other questions right now?
Not right now.
All right, we'll turn it to members of the public, and I'll just say that we've had a number of hearings on this project. If you do wish to speak, I'll just ask that it's something new regarding the project. So with that having been said, anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? Sir?
I'm Phil Logan, Precinct 1. This is, everyone can relax. This is not a challenge at all. But this is an event, or events taking place where we have the Steamship Authority putting in a $60 million project, and we've got this large project taking place. Down the road, they will meet. They will affect each other, okay? And I don't see any planning to mitigate that crash that's going to occur there. It might take the form of a 4-lane highway in Woods Hole. And so the question I had was, if a 4-lane highway were proposed as Woods Hole Road, how would that affect the density of this project, for example? Or actually, if the bigger picture for you is, how does that affect so many other things you're going to be looking at when the state unilaterally decides to put in a 4-lane highway? I mean, the steamship is increasing freight traffic at 4% a year. They've got a third slip, a 50% capacity increase, and there's no intermediate or short-term mitigating factors for the freight traffic. So just something to think about, that's all. Thank you.
Do you have a question? The gentleman?
Oh, sure.
Sir?
Excuse me, sir. I think Jerry has a question for you.
At this point in time, it's speculation on your part what may happen on a state road.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I knew.
No, I just...
Does anyone else out there have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Denise Callahan, and I live on Walker Street. And I was here for the very first meeting. It's not something new, but just my opinion of what's going on. I've known Mark and I've seen his work. I love the area of Woods Hole. And I just want to say that I think it's great that he's taken the time and the investment into the project. I think it'll be a great asset to the community. Right now, it looks like crap. This will only improve and bring it to a higher level. So I say, let's go forward. You know, it sounds like he's very accommodating and willing to work with everybody. So I think it's the right thing to do to move forward. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments, questions, concerns regarding this project? Sir?
Chairman Hurry, members of the board, for the record, my name is Michael Conley, and I too live in precinct 1. In terms of, I think that puts me in the ball of wax. And within that construct, I just want to make 3 points, and it would go as follows. And the first is really an anecdote. And it goes to the fact that I had my plumber in the other day to deal with a couple of problems with the plumbing on my house at 87 Gunning Point. The plumber is a fellow by the name of Ray Pontieri. And I know Ray in terms of he lives on Millfield Street in Woods Hole. And I asked him point blank, I just said to him, hey, have you followed this project, the Dome, the Nautilus, up there on the bluff on the Woods Hole Road? And Pontieri said, yeah, I'm aware of it. And I said, well, have you taken a position? He said, no. And I said to him, well, what would you say about the project? And I actually wrote down what he had said to me, and that was, I'd love to see the town approve that project. In his reference being to the Dome Nautilus. The roof, if you're riding on the Woods Hole Road, the roof has fallen in on the existing buildings. It is a dump. And the new project would take out the eyesore and the blight and give us something which would be a vast improvement on what we have. And I really felt that Pontieri captured the essence of what's in front of us. But it isn't just, and on the second, well, let me just say, it's not just Ray Pontieri, you know. For instance, you have a direct abutter with Beth Colt. She's in support of it. Susan Vita is an immediate abutter who owns the Time of Sands. Arnie Gepstad at the Time of Sands. If you walk down the Woods Hole Road, a stone's throw from where the project is, you have Rob and Wendy Blumberg, both who support the project. And that's just to name a handful. There's real depth and support to support this project in the Woods Hole community itself. Then, as the second point is the obstacle course, and that is it starts with the Woods Hole Community Association and the covenant, which requires that they strike an agreement with the proponents, which they have. I'm a member of the Woods Hole Community Association, have been for a couple of years, and in that context, I sat through 4 or 5 meetings and finally saw them work out a resolution that everybody could live with. Nobody thought it was perfect, but they wanted something other than that one monolithic structure, and that's why there's 5 buildings as opposed to 1. Then came the Cape Cod Commission, then the Planning Board, and now the ZBA. Within that construct, there's still the Falmouth Historical Commission and the Mass Historical Commission. I myself chaired the Massachusetts Historical Commission for 16 years. It gives me an interest in all historic preservation, regardless of whether it takes place in my neighborhood or anywhere in the state. And I just want to say that the road of the Mass Historical Commission has always been, and I've got my predecessor who's been there for 20-plus years, but the Historical Commission looks at it on one level. Let the town let the town fathers, I don't mean to exclude the town mothers, but let the town fathers, in concert with the respective commissions and boards, make the decisions themselves, decide what's best for the town, and then the project goes to the Mass Historical Commission, last in the row. In fact, when the Mass Historical Commission is asked to, takes a look at the project, they will go directly to the Falmouth Historical Commission and ask them for comment. That's the way the procedure operates. And then there's the backfilling and all that goes on with respect to, if the Historical Commission asks for a change, then the Cape Cod Commission has to come back in and approve the same change, just as you have to do the like. But really, in terms of the third point, the summation, it was over 3 months ago, I was here and I testified, and I was using my experience having reviewed and approved hundreds of projects across the Commonwealth with respect to historic preservation, and I stated unequivocally at the time, this is a great project, a great project. And if nothing else, with respect to the Dome and the Nautilus, while it is not perfect, it is a better project today than it was in January of 2019. And with respect to those people who have been in opposition, specifically the Fern Lane people who are up behind Building A, this is an infinitely better project than what Wise Living had with that monolithic structure going back 11 years ago in approvals, the final approval taking place in 2009, some 10 years ago. So just given the six different entities that the project has to be reviewed by and approved by, and what has happened here, and I've seen the proponent exercise such great flexibility and being so open to the constructive criticisms and the changes that have taken place over the last three months. I just have to ask that you act favorably on this project. It would be tragic to see this go down the drain and to have a dump sitting on top of that hill. I thank you for your time, not just in the context of tonight, but the time that you spend. I have sat and chaired numerous boards myself in the state legislature as Secretary of the Commonwealth. My last job was the acting chairman of the Boston Licensing Board before I came to Falmouth to get away from it all. And I really didn't escape after all. I'm still working the same streets in the hopes that we'll have a better state. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. Any questions from the board?
I just have one question. Are you still a member of the community association?
Oh, yeah. One of the first things, Mr. Duggan, if I could, just as an example. The first duty, and this applies to you as it applies to me, when you move into a community and you become a full-time resident, you have to be involved in the community. It's really a criteria my wife and I live by. And I'm still a member of the Woods Hole Community Association. I just involved 2 new entities. We were there just yesterday morning at the Falmouth Service Center because we've got to play a role there as well. Go ahead.
So the question I had is that this statement's been made that they're in agreement with the project. But we have a
Right.
letter that was submitted to the
Right.
file that said they're in opposition. So my only question was, do you know why we have that letter? Because no one seems to have given an answer.
Do you want to answer that?
I mean, just so I can understand why there's,
Well, I think it's true that the letter doesn't say they're in opposition. It says they don't support. There's a difference. There's a...
well, this says that
does
the
it
Woods
say-
Hole Community Association is opposed to the project.
All right, then I
At the meeting
stand
of the Board of
corrected.
Directors, we voted unanimously in opposition. Please accept this letter. I haven't seen anything that changed that, and I'm a little confused myself because it seems like there is
When is that
support.
dated?
This was from January 17th.
Well, you've seen the amended covenant. The covenant is signed, sealed, and delivered. It's being held in escrow pursuant to agreement with their attorney and with them. The amended covenant would be recorded with Registry of Deeds, and it is signed by the officers of the Community Association, and it allows this project to go forward in connection with the covenant. You'd have to ask the members of the association that question about why they would submit a letter that says that with no details.
No,
When they have
it's
si-
very
when they have
confusing when you have to review
It
a
is,
file.
it is very confusing, and it raises a question to us about why they would do that. And certainly, the decision to grant a special permit is your decision to make. It's not the community association's to make. They haven't explained their reasoning, have they? because you don't know what it is.
We haven't heard another statement, it's just that people have said that have come to the podium that they're this association is in support. But
Well,
the only thing I have to base it on is a letter.
What we've said is that we have an agreement that allows the project by the association, and that's in writing, and you have it, and it's a legal document, and we've relied on it for 2 years, a year and a half perhaps since it was signed, maybe a little over a year, and we gave up plans to do a different project that might have been preferable to the developer. We put on hold a number of different plans because we reached an agreement with the association.
No, that's okay, I just wanted to know if anyone knew why the letter is in the file.
I would like to answer that myself in terms of the last meeting prior to the ZBA's initial hearing on this project of January 17th. There were certain elements within the community, there were certain individuals from the Woods Hole community who went to that meeting just prior to the January 17th meeting of the ZBA. The political pressure was extraordinary, and unfortunately, they went by the rubric that while they had an agreement, they were able to say that they did not support the project. And it wasn't a question of opposition, and it was just merely, from my perspective, knuckling under to political pressure.
Thank you.
I have a question.
January 17th.
Mr. Conley, I think I can ask this, but I'll ask it anyway. Would you consider yourself a subject matter expert under Massachusetts law as to historical commission procedures
Yes, I
based
would.
on your education background?
Right, based on the fact that for 16 years I chaired the Historical Commission. But I want to point out that, my successor, William Galvin, took over in 1995. He's been there now. He's in his 5th term now. So I'm out 20 years, but I have an expertise in that area, yes.
Thank you.
Am I free to go? The Bruins are playing tonight. I am crying that I have to not in front of my TV set, rooting them on.
Thank you, Mr. Conley, and go Bruins.
Yeah.
We're all for 'em.
Anyone else out there, any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Okay, seeing none, back to the board.
I would prefer that we close this rather than continue it. Close it, and then we can discuss some conditions that will be presented to us, a positive motion sometime in the future. But I guess closing the hearing would be the first thing I want, if there's no opposition from the proponent or board members.
I'm kind of on the fence. This is my quandary. I understand what they're saying about historic, but we're asked to look at a project that has a portion that we're told is significant to the project that is a complete unknown. And we're looking to increase density on the site that I think could be affected by whatever the use is gonna be of that structure. Plus, with historic, maybe historic will require changes, but I would think they would have applied to historic and planning so that when they came here, we'd have all the pieces of the puzzle.
You just said they don't have to.
I didn't say they had to. I
No,
said
but
it
they
would seem
prefer
that.
them not to, because they want all our input. And the planning board's review said, any changes, has to come back to us. And I'm not sure what ability we have to supersede a state historic commission. I don't disagree with your concern, but I think they've waited long enough. I think we should go along with it. I mean, go along with it with conditions.
I just think we need to know what the use is and what the answer is for historic in
They've
that
said
building.
they don't necessarily know. It's,
Well,
I mean, and they can't know.
We're hearing we need flexibility, we need discretion, and I understand all that. It just seems like there's a big unknown on this front portion.
I don't think there's
And
nothing wrong at all.
I'm just not ready to make a decision in favor
Well,
without knowing.
what information do you need to know?
Well, if they decide they want to, like they said, they want to just say it was a use for the condominium association, that answer's right there.
Well, they did
pick
say
the
they
use.
do. They said they'd do that.
That's okay. The only,
That can be a condition.
for the record, Mark Bogosian, the only other use that we're considering is a nonprofit use. If a nonprofit were to come forward and say, we want to do this, we understand that
Well, finish your sentence, but then I have a question for you.
that we have no problem making this be a use that is accessory to the residents. But we also were trying to listen to the public and other people involved. That's why we brought up the nonprofit.
So that's really my question. What was motivating you to go for the nonprofit? Was it just the fact that the community?
I was trying very hard to make the community happy with that, so I made it a point to say it was only a nonprofit, meaning that there's nothing I can do there for profit, that is only there for a community benefit. If artist studios that weren't associated with the residents wanted to go in and have 6 artist studios, if it was a condition to move forward, the project that we're working on is not about the use of that dome and what it would be to, so I would hope the board would be willing to, whether it's conditions or, we would come back if anybody had a use that required more than 8 spots or anything along those lines.
Was the primary concern that you sensed from the community that they didn't want the dome to be exclusively used by the residents?
Yes, and we also.
So it wasn't so much, just to follow, it wasn't so much that it be a nonprofit use as that it.
They wanted public access, and we were trying to make sure that public access was.
Mark, I want to just jump in real quick.
You're getting double billing tonight.
Always.
I'm trying to, just to be clear, I'm trying to understand the motivation.
No,
because-
I think that it's a
because,
perfectly.
I think I can understand why it's causing Robert some heartburn and frankly me as well, as it's too undefined.
Sure.
You know, there's
So-
too many loose ends.
So let's try to address them, which is what I'd like to do. To answer your question to Mark, Mr. Foreman, at the time this project came forward, there was a group that was very interested in taking over the dome. Okay, they wanted to create a large-scale development that simply wasn't compatible with what we wanted to do. So, in negotiation with the community association, that group was active and said, we want a chance to try to work something out. And we said, of course, we'll give it a period of time to try to figure that out. And then what we said with the community association in that covenant was, if it doesn't work with this group, we'll look at other nonprofits. It was always a possibility that it was going to be used for the residents, because that's what was permitted previously. Now, I think a way to address Mr. Dugan's concern and your concerns, if this board wants to condition it, that it be used for the residents as a community space with public access on some sort of basis, because that's something that we did say we would allow, and we're happy to do, and with the ability to have groups like the community association have meetings there. We're perfectly happy to do that, and then any change to that would simply require that we come in and modify that decision. We would be perfectly satisfied to do that, because I agree, it is an unknown, but the problem is we can't know for certain anything other than the community, the potential condominium use, because we're looking at a 3-year lead-in, and no one's going to say, yes, we'll take that and we'll sign a lease for 3 years from now.
Sure. I guess this is as much for the board to try to get us in unanimity. Could we proceed with recommending Noreen draft up a positive approval, which between now and the time it's signed or comes back before us for discussion, will be reviewed by both sides? And if we have to, keep it open until we see that. I think the planning board did that. I know I would prefer to close it because I think we can put enough conditions on it. They're going to see the conditions and say we agree to this and that. So I would prefer to close it and then move forward with the information we have.
It's certainly a possibility, Jerry, but does anyone have any other comments, concerns? that they want to raise at this point?
In terms of closing it?
Like closing or just anything in general? Sure.
Well, yeah, so the only other one I have is the information from conservation. But we could leave the record open for that.
They have to comply with that anyways, right?
I understand, but, you know, it just,
Well, I mean, I understand too, but, you know, the process of good governance, I don't mean to be lecturing, is we have a body that's that's responsible for conservation. They have to comply with conservation. We can make it a condition. If they go there and they get thumbs down, they have to deal with it because they can't move ahead without it. And I know we like to have our ducks in order, but this project has been going on, and this seems like a minor issue for Concom. They have to go back to Concom and get a write-up.
well, so if it's a minor issue, we leave the record open, we get Concom input, and then we have the final,
We still,
just for that.
we can still get Concom input.
One thing I do want to note, Mr. Foreman, is that the special permit process allows for a referral period, which is 35 days from when the referrals are circulated. Concom essentially issued a no comment at that time. Now, understanding that we have to deal with Concom either way, whether they issue a referral or not, we're going to do so because we have to do so. And if it's a condition that we work with Concom, well, of course we're going to work with Concom. We're going to do that regardless as to whether or not it's a condition. But I don't think it's anything that necessarily needs to hold up this process.
And you come back for modification if they made a change that would require our approval of planning board.
I don't believe they're going to require any changes, because I think we're out
I
of
won't
their, essentially
speculate.
out of their jurisdiction. But of course, that's their determination to make, so we'll comply with making sure that's the case.
Anything else, Ken?
So I just, with respect to Robert's concerns, I guess it's a question for him.
I just want to define use.
If we basically, they're amenable to
If they're
having it
amenable to that.
To be basically condo, space, common space for the development.
Then we work out the decision, we'd put condition on that, and then if that changed in the future, they come back, but at least we know as condo space, they don't need all the extra parking, they don't need all the extra.
And we'd still create those parking spaces for that occasional public use. But we're happy to
And
do.
it could change, but at least at that
Yeah,
point, we know that.
we're happy to have that condition, and then to the extent it changes, to the extent there is a nonprofit that wants to use the space on a regular basis, we would have to amend the decision. It's as simple as that.
You agree?
And I would only like to add that we'd be allowed to have meetings of nonprofits, such as the Community Association, that are accommodated by 8 parking spaces, which would be 24 people. Then we can keep our covenant with the association, which said they'd like to be able to have meetings there. If we're limited by parking, we're limited by parking. That's fine.
I guess in theory, if they pack 5 people into a car, they could have 40 people.
They come with a van.
They could walk.
They could walk.
Mr. Chair, I think we've,
I have another question.
Oh.
What's the time frame as far as when you think this would start? I mean, are we talking another year?
We're going to close it tonight, or? I mean, it's hard to say with a lot of certainty, because we do still have to go through the historic process. I mean, the intent is to start this project as soon as possible. I think a realistic situation would be if the historic permitting process goes well, I think starting in the fall is realistic. If the historic process stalls, you're not going to start a project like this in December in all likelihood, so you'd be looking at early spring next year. But I think all things being equal, I think we'd be looking at early at the fall on the early side. And it is going to be a phased project. And I actually I made a misstatement at the last hearing, and I actually want to correct it on the record, which is I said that Building A would be done last. And the correct statement is actually Building E would be done last. So you'd have the duplexes and the affordable housing done first, you'd have Building A done, and then Building E would be the last project.
What is the elapsed time? It is 39 market rate units.
And 4 affordable. So the last project was 43 affordable with off-site, 43 market rate with off-site affordable.
Right.
And now we're doing 39 market rate on-site with 4 affordable on-site.
Right. But what's the time frame? Is this gonna take 10, 15 years, or what's the?
I certainly hope not.
Well, we gotta-
No, I mean, I think the ideal situation for all the phases would be 3 to 4 years.
Well, I look at some others in the, I don't know what the, I'm not a real estate guy, but you look at, there's 38 units, 36 units, whatever it is, and you're coming up on 12 years, and they still got.
That Forest Cove?
Forest Cove. Now, I know that went through a bankruptcy.
Yeah, there
and
were
all that,
there were some
but
pretty
that was only
significant
a couple of
complications in
years.
there. There were some pretty significant complications in that process.
But it was still only a couple of years for the bankruptcy activity.
That's also a very different project, because you had a road development, you have the project spread out, whereas, you're gonna have the duplexes and the affordable constitute 10 units, that's gonna be done first. Then you have a building that's gonna be 20 units, done as one block. So it's not like you're doing a duplex, and then a duplex, and then a duplex, and then a duplex, and then a duplex, like Forest Cove would be.
But that project's gonna, at the rate they're going, it's gonna be another 2 or 3, 4 years. I mean, is this gonna be the same kind of thing?
I don't anticipate that's gonna be the case, it's just the nature of the buildings themselves don't allow for that.
Because when I first saw it was in the newspaper a couple of years ago that it was being purchased and it was for 55 and over, and I said, gee, I gotta get out of my house because it's got 5 levels and that'll be perfect. But I also read what's in here about the condominiums and how they're gonna be involved in the dome. And it makes me wonder, I don't know that I'd wanna sign a.
Well, we can talk about that later, Ed, but I don't know if now's the time to negotiate this.
I'm worried about you being able to sell them.
Well, I mean, it's something that they'll have to deal with.
Yeah.
And they'll sell or they won't. But I expect they will.
Yeah, just don't want it to go belly up.
I don't think Mark does either.
Okay, that's my concern.
Anything else? Bob, anything? No. Jerry?
I'm in favor of,
Can we see if Noreen has any comments?
Nothing specific other than you got some material very recently that, I don't know how much time you had to look at, so.
but we should be able to,
So we can close the hearing, keep the record open to get any,
The written rec.
the written record.
plus you could proceed with a record of decision, right? A positive motion with input from us.
Well, if we vote that.
Of course. Don't vote it.
Step 1 is deciding whether to close the hearing.
Yeah, but step 1's trying to look ahead too, to project alternatives. You should have been in the service. Have a plan B and C.
There's a building B and C.
Well, regarding closing the hearing, I think we've received all the information we need to render a decision.
I would agree.
Everyone would agree with me on that?
Yeah.
With the exception of, yeah,
Well,
I agree. I fundamentally
is everyone
With respect to the
fundamentally agree
zoning.
with that? With respect to zoning. So we could close.
Are we gonna close to keep the written record open or just close? And I don't know if there's a meaningful
Well, I think-
difference.
Might make sense to close and leave the written
I think,
record
I think
open.
we should.
And we
Yeah.
can we still give her a positive motion? a
Well,
recommendation?
we'll discuss that after
Well,
we
well, no,
decide
you
that.
don't discuss it after, you discuss it.
Why
what's the
not,
pers-
Jerry?
Because we make a decision. I mean, it's like, do you want this or that, but I can't tell you what that is. This is an open process. I'd like to know, to be fair to them and to fair to this board,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
you know, it's,
Well, I'll tell you what I'm envisioning right now.
Okay.
If we do close the hearing right now and leave it open for the written, we could potentially, given the size and scope and the amount of hearings that we've had, we could direct Noreen to make a positive motion with perhaps some guidance tonight. We could, obviously give some conditions and findings in support of that. And,
would we allow the applicant an opportunity to look at it, revise it, improve it? Not change A to B, but, you know,
it might make sense to pick a date in the not-too-distant future to actually have another date just to review everything and then vote upon it on that night.
Well, sure.
okay, so this would be a draft positive
Yes,
recommendation.
it's usually what we ask for.
How does everyone feel about that? That's just a suggestion.
No, that's fine.
No, I think I'll go along with that.
Attorney Clara, would you be amenable to that?
Absolutely.
I think you would have to sign another extension if you
How
are.
long, I suppose the question becomes, how long do we?
How long do we need to
Yeah.
draft such a decision?
Well, let's look
No
at the
rain?
scheduled hearings.
About May 30th, because you've got a commitment for the 40B on
But
the,
could you draft it between
23rd.
now and then? I mean, that's, and then we'll squeeze it in.
May 30th?
We're certainly happy to agree to that.
Yeah, May 30th,
Thank you, Attorney Clara.
there's only two items. There's only two items on May 30th.
So that's looking like a possibility.
So what time are we starting on? Maybe we start at 6?
6:30.
Maybe.
What else is happening that day?
Try to schedule it so
That's another
that
40.
these are near the end.
I don't think I could do it before 6:30.
No, if we start at 6, but they don't go on till 7 or something like that. I don't know what else we're looking at
this
that
is a-
day.
That's a 40B.
Is that Locust?
There's only two things on the hearing.
Right.
But one of them's a 40B.
I think we wouldn't have a problem if it's 6:30.
Oh, scheduling them for 6, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay, yes.
All right.
All right, anyone want to do the honors?
So I'll move, but we are going to leave the written record open, yes?
Yes.
Is that our
Yes.
decision?
I think that was.
So I'll move that we close the hearing, leaving the written record open
Second.
until
we have-
May
25th.
May 30th.
May 30th?
But then we have to,
Well, I think we want to,
I think we should close the written record before that.
I agree. May 23rd, that's,
Then it gives 7 days
Yeah, that
Yep.
would be have a week.
oh, May 23rd.
for the written
And,
record.
But we have
That's
to
my
second-
motion.
I'll second that.
And, then we'll,
Okay, motion was made by Ken and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
and so now we want to have a motion to instruct Noreen to prepare a draft, positive draft, approving the project. You
With
want to give us some
conditions.
guidance on conditions.
Right.
The Second. I mean, the conditions that the applicant agreed to tonight about adding the flexibility, they're gonna make it,
One more, no?
my mind's going soft.
You didn't pass it down.
The use of the dome
Yes.
being restricted in some way, to allow for public meetings, but not necessarily requiring that a external nonprofit be charged. I would say no. I think there should be a condition that the parking needs to all be behind the building. Behind the nearest building, whatever, parking for any particular building has to be behind the front facade of that building.
Oh, that's consistent with the bylaw, right?
Yes.
Is that consistent with what you were saying before, Ken, on,
We talked about building being C and D.
Yeah.
Not allowing parking there, but building A should still allow parking in front.
Because it's behind.
Where do you have parking in front of Building A? I don't even see it. Oh, I guess I do see it.
And then there's parking in this area too.
But that's at the back
That-
of the lot
Behind
anyways.
the facade of the first building.
Yeah, that's a pretty,
So I don't, if the condition is that there be no parking in front of any building, that changes the plan entirely.
yeah, it does. I understand. All right, let's agree to Building C and D then.
you at one time wanted proposed parking, but not necessarily actually building it in case they wanted in the future?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about putting in extra spaces somewhere at some point in the future, they should be,
Oh, we're not doing, that's right.
No, because it's condominium ownership now.
Okay.
If they change it, then I'll have to modify.
What else?
Subject to Concom approval?
Do
Yes.
we, I mean, it's a really large project, I know we've had issues before with building hours. So I guess we would use the
What's in the,
normal ones we've been using.
Which are?
the town?
It's actually not in the town.
No, I thought
No,
it was
it's
in the-
not. It used to be DPW. Why don't we
It's
say,
actually not in the town.
Oh.
So we have to list it.
why don't we say 7:30
Oh,
to,
construction hours.
Construction hours, yeah.
7:30 to 5? Or we just,
7 should be fine, 7?
7, isn't it?
7,
So 7.
7 to 5, Monday through Friday?
I thought it was 7.
Why don't we get something
7 to
down and it
7.
can be, people-
We'll come up with hours, like 7 to 7, and then
Nothing on
afternoon on
Sunday?
Saturday, no work on
No
Sunday.
Sunday, no holidays.
yes.
So what are you doing for Saturdays included?
Saturdays afternoon. What we've done before is afternoon on Saturday, do you wanna? That's what we did with the,
What do we do?
on Saturdays, we usually do it afternoon time,
To start it, and
to start noon to 7
start.
versus.
And that's what we did.
That's what we
for
did with
Liberty
Blue
Green.
Flag and Liberty Green.
It was pretty late, Saturday?
I could see 9.
Yeah, I agree. I hate to agree with you, Jerry.
You're learning.
So what are you doing for Saturday?
I guess 9.
9 AM to
You should, gotta get up in the morning to get to the bank on Saturday anyway.
9 AM
If I
to
had
7 PM?
money like you.
Billy, you were the one that made it 12 noon at Blue Flag.
All right, someone put a line.
I mean, these are finer points that, you know. Subject to the planning, I think it's automatic, the planning board conditions.
Right.
Site plan
13.
condition. Well, yeah, site plan, Board of Health review.
I think there was 13 on that list, wasn't there?
Yeah, I didn't want to necessarily, okay, yeah, we're going to incorporate all of them. Numerically, or are we just going to by reference, the few we think we want to?
Just do it by
Emphasize.
reference, except for if we are asking for one slight change in the parking in front of C and D, so that's different from what they said.
Any language concerning conservation?
Yeah, Jerry mentioned that already.
Oh, I'm sorry,
He said
Jerry.
Subject to conservation.
And do we want to touch upon
So,
Mass Historical and Falmouth Historical Commission?
I think that's in the, what do we want to say? I mean, they obviously have to approve it,
Be subject to.
and they have to come back to us if they suggest something that's inconsistent with our review or the planning board review.
That's item 3 under the planning board conditions. Covers it. Sections 2 and 3.
Who says they're going for new certificate? And they can't supersede the historic commission.
I guess we can argue, one thing important to incorporate is that it's consistent with the intent of 240, 240,
Yes, excellent.
which specifically states revitalization. Certainly that.
It's good language. Anything else?
For revised plan.
Yeah, updated, whatever those are.
Revised plan, yeah.
All right, anything else that we can touch upon tonight?
Probably enough to get us started, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Noreen, you want any more guidance?
I think we've got a good bit to start with. And then do you want to have this draft circulated to you in advance, or do you want to sit at the meeting and go, and
Yeah.
Oh,
then
no.
Prefer
Advance.
Advance,
in
yeah.
advance.
comments back
Yeah.
to me?
Right.
And then we're gonna submit it to the applicant too. I think that's what we've done in 40Bs, on some controversial decisions, so that, not that they're gonna make a yes into a no, but they may improve the language, clarify something. Could redline it so we'd know what they're asking for.
Okay, anything else?
I can't think of anything
All right.
right now.
Oh, did you want height certification at?
That's a good idea.
That would be a good idea.
At
Yes, so-
framing?
So, Noreen,
She can
I was
as-built.
talking about this earlier with Noreen, and she pointed out, if you ask for height certification at the framing stage, that's a better strategy
Okay.
before everything gets built.
I'm sorry, Bob, did you?
No, no, I was agreeing with the same thing.
Oh,
You want to
okay.
do it at framing because you don't have to take
Well,
it
yeah,
down.
but how much goes on top of the frame? I mean.
Nothing,
front.
that's the point.
I don't know, you get shingles, you might have cupola, I don't, if that's what you guys want, I think it's,
Well, I think what it gets to is if a builder's finished the building and then they do the height cert, now they've got all that interior work that might get affected if they have to adjust.
Right.
You know, you can do it
Based on passing.
at the end too, but it's, why not give them, see if they're going awry.
hope so. We'll go bankrupt if, no crime, sorry,
You want a final as-built?
of course.
Yes.
That's enough for you to work with, Noreen, for now?
I think so.
Okay.
You got to call for the vote.
Yes, I do. So, motion to direct Noreen to draft a positive draft
Second.
was made by, I think it was made by Ken and it was seconded by Bob earlier. And we agreed upon the date,
May 30,
May 30th, 6:30 here at Town Hall
with the
for,
record open until the 23rd.
with the record open until the
For written.
23rd
Right.
for written. Anything else included in that motion?
And you need a signature on
And
that
we need
date.
a signature to confirm extension. All right, so that motion was made by Ken and seconded by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for the update, Attorney Brown.
I knew that. Check that
Pardon?
already.
Yes, TJ's got it, yeah.
Is this it here, Noreen?
Yeah, you just have to fill in the date.
Wait, what file is that? Oh, wait a sec.
No.
Lenny, we're still in open meeting.
We are, we're
Here,
just giving it a minute
This is
for
it.
everyone.
I believe.
Noreen, how do you want these? Just
May
You can just leave it
set with
roll
the other
for
ones?
now.
30?
Yeah, just leave it,
Oh,
yeah,
wait a minute, you gotta
separate.
get these down there.
May, it's.
Gosh, that's the other work, we don't have to do the gym.
Haven't been down there, but we're dealing with builders. You know what that's like, right? Installer can't provide, this guy can't provide.
Should we put deadlines?
What?
Deadlines.
Yeah, flexible.
All right, so we do have open meeting items, minutes from April 18, 2019. We're going to defer that until the next meeting, Noreen?
Yes, thank you.
We've already handled item number 2,
Three.
and I believe we handled item number 4, but not 3. 3 would be 118-18.
That's the one that was extended. Continued.
Yeah, but do I
No,
need
no,
to
wait a
show
minute.
that?
That has all my markings.
No, that's the trailer park. Three is the trailer park.
Might have been wrapped up into that plan.
Sorry, Noreen, we handled 2 and 4, but not 3, is that correct?
So, number
don't have it.
3 is for 836 Palmer Ave, which is Blue Flag. They have requested minor modifications for their plans.
Bye-bye, hot tub.
So,
Why did they take that
so
out?
they are reducing their maintenance building from 1,980 square feet to 936 square feet, so substantial reduction.
From what is-
They're shifting the location of their clubhouse 13 feet to the north, relating to a topography issue. rearranging the back deck, eliminating the hot tub with spa, and a slight shift to their service drive with handicap parking closer. So site improvements and reduction.
Ed might vote against getting rid of the hot tub.
Why did they take, nothing, not for the record, but why did they take the hot tub out?
I can't speak to that. You could ask the applicant to reconsider, I'm sure.
I personally think they're public health concerns, hot tubs.
I don't know, mosquitoes maybe?
No, people going pee-pee.
Oh.
Well, no, I mean, you'd be surprised what comes out of hot tubs.
Anyway.
You can't say that on the public
You
record.
have to heat the hot tub.
But we do need a vote to approve it.
Yes.
Yes,
Anyone wish to make that motion?
Motion to approve.
second it.
Motion to approve by Bob, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Okay, and then lastly, we have an extension request by 213 North Falmouth Highway in order to comply with the comprehensive permit, opening the hearing in 30 days. They have agreed to a slight extension for the hearing to be open just past the 30 days.
Okay.
And would request that you would agree to that as well.
Motion to agree?
Motion approved by
Do they
Bob.
have a specific date?
Yes, so we are expecting to open that on May 30th, and they were gracious enough to consent to that.
All right, so, motion to agree with that was made
Motion
by
to extend to May 30th.
Bob, and I believe it was second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
I think that leaves us with board updates. Congratulations for Jerry. Have you been sworn?
Yes, I've been sworn.
Okay, congratulations then, finally.
Thank
And,
The select board has reopened and re-advertising for the remaining associate position. So
Okay.
there will be another advertisement in the paper, and they expect to interview, I think, on the 20th,
okay,
hopefully.
so it's still
Okay.
open. Anyone out there still want to apply, please feel free. We'd be very happy to have you. James isn't here tonight, but on the same night that Jerry was appointed to the full voting position, James Morse was appointed to the open alternate seat, and I'm sure we'll be meeting him soon. Also want to point out that this past Monday, Noreen and I attended the selectmen's meeting. One of the items on their agenda was a discussion about affordable housing. Neither one of us spoke at the meeting, but it was good to attend and hear from the different people in town regarding affordable housing, and I think there's gonna be another meeting soon regarding that. Discussion date for a future workshop, we'll put that on hold until we're at a full board very soon. It's nice to hear. Zoning recodification committee
Nothing
is there.
significant.
Ongoing. Fantastic. And future agenda items, are there any?
What did they talk about at the affordable housing?
So it was different stakeholders in town, just discussing options about how the town can proceed regarding affordable housing. There was talk from the Affordable Housing Committee, they didn't have a quorum, but they did have a couple of members talk.
Mr. Drewley was there, right?
Mr. Julie was
I
there.
caught him on TV.
He was on.
I think they're also hoping to review and revise the LIP application and process. I think it
There was
was
some discussion about that.
aged, and they're hoping to review that
The
as well.
kid said also, just like if the town wants to have open green space, we may have to establish, I think they may have to establish some type of funding for affordable housing, because at the rate it's going, we could never get there. And the idea of having areas designated so that you don't get into areas that you shouldn't have this high density. They
Right.
mentioned Davis Straits, I think.
And there was an issue with identifying where in town for high-density projects to
sounded all
promote affordable housing.
With wastewater
Yeah.
capacity also as an issue.
I got there late, but did they say it was a 50-year plan?
I believe they did say the Davis Straits.
So
They-
50
it was a
50 years.
concept
They said
study,
that
50
the day that
50
they had the
years.
meeting in here, remember? We were sitting in the back, and that was 50 years.
I won't be here.
I know, we all said that.
And something that we're not always involved in, that was interesting, it was the concept of basically establishing funding through the town for affordable housing, whether they should set up, Noreen, you might be able to correct me on this, the term for, was it rolling applications and having different deadlines for
Right.
funding projects?
Right, so the funding primarily to this point has been coming from the CPA. And, you know, there's limited funds there, but the other part too is access for people that are interested, and can they find a way that will make it so that more people can have access or opportunities at the same time.
Did they discuss the fact that Falmouth has a special act for affordable housing? I just ran across this. I'll send it to you. I send it to the board.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It was a local thing for about affordable housing with a trust fund established and the Board of Selectmen being the trustees of this fund.
Oh, yes,
The
so
plan
they,
or something is already?
No, it's an act that's in
yes,
place.
so the Board of Selectmen, more unusually perhaps in this community, functions in the same capacity as housing trusts in other communities. So they actually are the party that votes for the CPA funds to be used and expended.
I'll send the
So
article to you.
that's probably what you're
And
referring to.
you can send it to the rest of the board.
Yes.
Anything else? No? Meeting adjourned.